Hello. Okay. Are we ready? Great. Welcome. Hope everybody's having a great day today. I'm Lori Graf. I'm the CEO of the Maryland Building Industry Association, and we're glad that you could join us. I'm going to go ahead and kick off this webinar today. We've been introduced to a whole new terminology over the last couple of weeks. We've got Zoom, we've got Google Teams, GoToMeetings, all sorts of things that have become part of our everyday vocabulary over the last several weeks. And the construction industry is no exception. We even have to deal with this on many different fronts, from job sites, construction job sites, to professional services, to government entities. So we've been really working hard over the last couple of weeks to really get a grasp on this. So I wanted to kind of just kick things off with this webinar. It's an exciting topic for us, technology. It's not an area that the construction industry is that familiar with. We've learned that we had to get really up to speed on it very quickly. And we're hoping that MBIA can be a great resource to our members during this crazy time. So the webinar today is working from home and how the home building industry is dealing with COVID-19. Before I turn things over and introduce our panelists, I did want to give a quick shout out to O'Neill Interactive, who was our sponsor and helping us to be able to bring all this new technology to you guys as an association. So first of all, we have our moderator, Jim Reese, from the law offices of Offit Kerman. He's Director of Business Development. Offit Kerman has been a longtime MBIA supporter, so we thank you for that. We also have Chris Riismandel from Epoch. Epoch is an IT service company. They're also an MBIA member, so we appreciate that. And they work with over 50 companies managing their IT systems, anything from small businesses to large businesses. And Chris has over 25 years experience dealing with that. So at this point, I'm going to go ahead and turn things over to Jim, who will moderate us. And by the way, if you have any questions, please put them into the chat feature. So go ahead, Jim.
Thank you. Hi, appreciate the introduction, Laurie. I'm Jim Reese from Offit Kerman. I'm Director of Business Development. Pleased to moderate this nice panel this morning. Hope everyone had a nice weekend, and hope everyone is staying home and safe and healthy and feeling good. We're going to kick this off. We're going to start with Laurie, and we're going to kick this off with some questions for Laurie about how she's dealing with this whole new world from the MBIA, from their angle as an organization and for their members. So Laurie, before we start, can you give us a little bit of background about MBIA real quick and the membership?
Sure, yeah. So we're residential construction is our focus. We're a trade association dealing primarily with residential construction, although we have members that do commercial, mixed use, and all the things in between. We've got about 1,040 companies. So obviously that ranges from developers to actual home builders, to contractors, to banks, and anything in between. Anybody that supplies the residential construction industry. We have 15 employees, and we're headquartered out of Maple Lawn, Maryland. And we're statewide. So we cover almost all the state. We have there's a few other trade associations that are in Western Maryland, but we work closely with them to cover the entire state of Maryland.
Okay, great. That's a nice segue. So you're statewide, which means you work in a lot of different local jurisdictions. We've already seen that on a national level. You know, each governor on a national level, each governor of different states has sort of their own mandates. So you're in various jurisdictions that deal with the processes of building houses. So in regards to technology, how have the local jurisdictions dealt with COVID-19, and how have they differed from one jurisdiction to another?
Great question. So just as a little bit of a segue, we have been classified as an essential business, residential construction. That follows all the federal guidelines. So we've been working closely with all of our jurisdictions. You can imagine that construction is a very hands-on industry. We can't do a lot. You can't build a house virtually. doesn't work that way. So we've had to really work closely with the local jurisdictions to make sure that the entire process is still being maintained. We have a severe housing shortage in Maryland, so we need to continue to produce housing for society in general. So we've been working with all the local jurisdictions some things just as simple as being able to process credit cards. Some jurisdictions haven't been able to process credit cards prior to this for our permitting and that type of thing. Clearly, that's something that we've been asking them to do. Some of the jurisdictions have stepped up and really done that. Others have already been doing it. We have some jurisdictions that are very paper heavy. We have other jurisdictions that have been doing e-permits for years. So we've been working with all those jurisdictions on all the different needs. In some cases, they've provided lock boxes so we can go to the county building, put the permit in the drawings in the lockbox. They will then have somebody go get it. Some cases they've been able to put virtual inspections together. So you can do it through some kind of platform such as Zoom or other platform. In some jurisdictions, we've been working on other types of virtual technology that we can do that doesn't require the permit inspectors to come on site. So we've been working with all, so it's a wide variety. As I said, each jurisdiction's been extremely different, but I will also say that each jurisdiction's been very working with us to try to get through this process together as we move forward.
Must be difficult with the courts closed. So you talked about lock boxes. Is that how they're all working at this point?
So a lot of the courts, they're closed to the general public, but they are still doing recording deeds. So we've been lucky in that sense. And there's a lot of the title work has already been moved in a lot of jurisdictions to some virtual type of things. You still need to do in-person signings and that type of thing. But we've been able to really move towards that. Governor also came out and is allowing for virtual notarization for real estate transactions. So that's been helpful as well. But like I said, I think everybody realizes the need to still be able to provide housing and new housing. So everybody's been working together to try to make sure a lot of that stuff still either still takes place or we can move it forward and try to make it better moving forward virtually.
So we're all continue to be reminded about safe social distancing. The 6 feet seems to be what they're talking about most of the time. And your members, many of the contractors and construction companies, are essential businesses. So they're out there working. How are they working and still complying with the safe social distancing, and what are the challenges that your members have with this?
So yeah, obviously, as I mentioned before, home building is something that you have to do. It's hands-on. So we've NAHB, our National Association of Home Builders, as well as the CDC and several others have come out with some guidelines to follow this. A couple of things, obviously the 6 foot social distancing has to take place. Sanitizing, making sure you have all of those types of equipments as far as the hand sanitizer, wipes, all of that, wiping down all your equipment, that type of thing. Also allowing, making sure your employees know that they don't have to come to work if they're sick. I think that's sometimes a big challenge, especially in our industry. But also making sure there's only people on the job site that have to be there. So you don't need to have everybody there. What can be done virtually should be done virtually. You can certainly do walkthroughs virtually, on the site and that type of thing. Making sure that there's only the people in the trailer that needs to be in the trailer. Making sure you do these. A lot of our sites do toolbox chats or some kind of daily meeting. Make sure that can be done virtually, just like we're doing Zoom here today. All of those types of things are really, really important. And then, of course, the personal protective equipment, which, as everybody knows, is hard to come by these days, but that's extremely important as well. And making sure everybody's using all of those methods. And all job sites should have a plan in place in case somebody should get sick on the job site. So those are the things that we're kind of working through. It's been a challenge, though, I will say that. I know a lot of my members are challenged, especially obtaining the hand sanitizers and the wipes and those types of things are just really hard to come by right now.
So speaking of the challenges, I'm sure we have a diverse listening audience. You've got members who are, literally the guys doing the building and hammering the nails and putting the houses together and doing the carpentry and et cetera, and electrical and plumbing. You've also got professional service firms like engineering firms and architectures. And then you've got the whole process of after the house is built, you've got a process of showing the house and selling the house and settlements and so forth. So you just mentioned challenges. Can you talk about the challenges for those at least three different groups of professionals and members that make up MBIA?
Sure, absolutely. So obviously, engineers and architects, it's a little bit less hands-on. You can do a lot of that via computer and technology, but they've had the added issues of, again, the permitting and inspections and that type of thing. And our industry just has not needed to be virtual in a lot of cases. So just trying to really catch up on the technology, and again, making sure that the permitting, and they're the ones that are mostly working with the permitting offices, the engineers and those types of things, and making sure that process can still move forward. As far as sales, this is a question I get pretty consistently, and I work with a lot of other associations like the realtors and stuff like that to make sure we're giving the proper guidance to our members. But real estate is something that can be done a lot virtually. I mean, you can do Zoom, you can do a lot of other things, and they were already moving towards that. However, it's still a hands-on process. So we've encouraged everybody to try to do as much as you can through these types of technologies. I know that there's been realtors that have gone into homes, and instead of doing open houses, they're doing kind of a virtual Zoom meeting or something like that for their clients. We've also encouraged, all sales centers and model homes should be closed. We are not promoting having anything where the public would come in at this point. So making appointment only and making sure everything's done as much virtually as possible. I've even heard of people doing settlements in the parking lot. They basically have their customer drive in, and you just hand them the thing, and then they sign it, and you hand it back through the car window. So trying to do as much as possible, as safely as possible. From the title side, I know they're not allowing anybody besides the people that are actually signing the documents to come into the office. We don't encourage any large groups of people coming to any of the sales centers or that type of thing. So it's been a challenge, but at the end of the day, I think that our industry is going to embrace this type of technology.
Okay, great, thank you. I assume you're fielding some phone calls and emails from your constituents and your members. What kind of questions have you been receiving specific to cybersecurity and IT solutions while everyone is now working remotely?
Yeah, so a lot. I'm consistently hearing questions. The biggest things, our members want to make sure that we're abiding by all of the rules and regulations. They want to make sure that they're doing all the job safety stuff. They want to make sure that they're still allowed to operate under all the governor's orders and the president's orders. So we've been consistently trying to manage that process for all of our members and go above and beyond with that process. But the biggest thing is they're working with construction workers that technology is new to them. So trying to just walk through that process, make sure everybody's being safe, making sure these types of calls are secure, making sure that the people on the ground are safe. But we are an integral part of the economy. So we need to it's a balancing act to try to make sure all that stuff happens. And our members are consistently trying to work through that. It is very difficult to go from an environment where it's very hands-on, whether you're an engineer or an architect or construction worker, to really being able to not do any of those things hands-on. So the technology is something that we just are learning about, and hopefully, the other panelists can give a little bit more insight into those types of things.
And are you getting inquiries asking for any specific types of resources to help your members?
Yes, these types of webinars specifically, quite honestly, and then just other, we deal with a lot of small businesses. And a lot of people, as we know, are going to be hit by this. So anything to make things easier for them as far as technology, but also, there's a lot of loans, there's a lot of small business resources out there. So those are the kinds of inquiries I'm getting. People do not want to lay off employees. People do not want to have to furlough employees. So anything that they can do to make things easier, whether it's through technology or loans or anything else, they've been reaching out to us pretty consistently.
So here's a question that I've been asking on a lot of Zoom chats and so forth, a lot of phone calls, and as I'm talking to some of my clients and prospects also, and that is, when this is over and we're on the other side of the curve that they keep talking about, what will the industry, the home building industry, look like? What changes will have occurred? And what will life be like moving forward? Obviously, first couple of months maybe one way, but a lot of people are asking, what's going to happen to my industry? What's it going to look like when we come out of the bunker finally and say, oh, we're back to work?
So I think long term, the home building industry is something that is very much needed in the state. We have a huge housing shortage. We have a supply shortage, and I think that it is something that is going to thrive as we move forward. The question is going to be what it looks like as far as the day-to-day type of thing, and interest rates and the market. So that's something, obviously, if a lot of people are unemployed, that becomes a huge issue. But I do believe that we are going to come out of this thriving. I believe that we are going to learn a lot about new technologies. My hope is that we've been talking to elected officials for years about e-permitting and other things that we can do more electronically, be more efficient. We have the technology, let's use it. So I do believe that after this, a lot of those jurisdictions are going to hopefully stick with some of the things that they're learning, and use this as a learning experience moving forward to what we can do more efficiently, to make things better for the consumers, and better for the business owners. So I think some of the stuff that the counties are doing as far as inspections, more virtual inspections, third-party inspections, being able to process things in a more efficient manner through e-permits, as opposed to, I know some counties you have to literally go down and walk building from building to building to building to get all your permits signed. Hopefully some of that stuff will change moving forward to make things a lot more efficient, more cost effective. Home building is expensive, home ownership is expensive. So hopefully we can learn a little bit from this experience and come out from it better.
Well, I'd like to add one thing on that. I think one thing business owners, the construction industry need to be aware of, as you point out all these things, I think what you're going to see from a technology perspective or a business perspective is you're going to see the disruption in that supply chain and those issues. If it's either permitting or it's getting materials, it's everything from this hand sanitizer to lumber, et cetera. What's going to be the disruption for that? So looking at your supply chain and saying, hey, what's the most efficient way? How can I apply technology to that to make that entire process efficient? Now, obviously, you only have control of that on your business side. We don't necessarily control the government aspect, but those things will be alleviated over time. But at least now you can look at those things to make sure that your business stays as efficient as possible.
Absolutely. Thank you, Chris, for reminding me of that. And we've already seen some supply issues, some supply chain issues. Specifically, Pennsylvania has deemed construction non-essential. So we've had a lot of supply issues. I talk to members on a daily basis. They've had issues with cabinets and countertops and those types of things that they get from Pennsylvania. So on a small scale, we've already started to see that. But you're right, we'll see that more and more moving forward. And it will be a challenge that we can hopefully, again, learn from and figure out a better way of and be more efficient moving forward.
And I think the other thing to take into consideration is if you have an outbreak in your staff, what do? Everyone's working in the office. Now, all of a sudden, you've got 14-day cycle where everyone's either not working. Let's assume everyone's going to be perfectly healthy, just they need to ride it out. You're still going to have that disruption. So how can you handle that in your organization and your office? How do you maintain business continuity when that occurs? So I think those are things for business owners to take a look at, because in Maryland, we've been relatively fortunate that we haven't been hit that hard with it yet. But at some point in time, I know Governor Hogan's done a fantastic job of trying to minimize the curve, et cetera. But think about those things and how it's going to impact your business.
Yeah, and if you go to our website, we actually have a COVID action plan sample, and everybody should be starting to think about that. I know I've, as running an organization myself, I've started to think about that. What I call it Plan A, Plan B, Plan C, but kind of what that looks like, and really have a response for if something happens, like you do have an outbreak. Everybody should be prepared for that.
Well, Laurie, you're great at these segues. It makes my job really easy because you just talked about your organization. We've been mostly talking about the industry, but you're in a unique situation because you also have an organization to run, MBIA, and just wondering how you've been able to adjust with this new life with the organization and with the industry, and where do you see the organization and moving forward when this is all finally when we're beyond this?
So yeah, our organization, we have education as a big primary focus for us. Advocacy is a big focus for us, but another big focus for us is networking. And with this outbreak, we can't do networking. We can't do events and that type of thing. So we've really started to kind of rethink how we do things. Obviously, we have all of our staff working remotely. So we've been using Zoom and other formats like Google Teams and that kind of thing to really start to think about how we're going to move forward as an organization. But it's a challenge. I mean, we are a networking organization, and that requires networking, and that's something that we and not social distancing. So that's something that we've really been evaluating. Obviously, putting on webinars like this. What other services can we provide to our members to make sure people are still feeling connected? But right now, quite honestly, everybody's just very concerned about their business. So we need to do whatever we can as an organization to help our members get through this, get their businesses through this, but also get through it as an association. And that means trying to figure out creative ways to connect people and still be relevant as an association moving forward.
Thank you, Laurie. Any parting words before we move over to our next guest panelist?
Just that we want to be a resource for our members, and we're very. I get a ton of calls. I get a ton of emails about all of this stuff, and I get calls from people saying, well, maybe construction should be shut down. Maybe it's not safe. So one of the things that I've really been trying to make sure everybody understands is we want to be safe. We want to look at all the technologies. We need to use this as an opportunity to move forward. And whether it's through technologies or other means, we need to make sure our employees are safe, make sure everybody's doing this the right way, but also protecting their business. So it's a balancing act, but I think that we can take some of this and learn from it and move forward with it.
Thank you. And before we run, I did want to mention for all of the folks on this call that they can go to the group chat. They'll see that Kerry Swift has added the link to the MBIA coronavirus information that's on your website. So that link is on the chat for everyone on this call. They can check that. It's public on the chat. I'd also like to mention at this time that there's a Q&A icon at the bottom of your screen. If you have questions, we will be taking questions for the last 15 minutes of this call when Chris is done. So feel free to post your questions on the Q&A chat, and we will read them to the panelists towards the end, the last 15 minutes. Okay, so let's move over to Chris Riismandel. He is the owner of Epoch. And Chris, welcome aboard. Why don't you first tell us a little bit about Epoch?
Sure. So Epoch is a managed security provider, or managed service provider, which is called an MSP in industry, or outsourced IT company. We're also a MSSP, which is a managed security service provider. So what we do is we basically run the networks for all different types of businesses, everything from their help desk to their cybersecurity, application development, or even running their line of business software. So we kind of really touch everything that's deals with technology for an organization. And we do it in a little different perspective where we're actually not just blocking and tackling with the IT. We're actually sitting there and looking at what's the impact of the business, how is business being affected by technology, and how's technology affecting the business, and trying to get very efficient ways to help our clients grow.
Okay. My guess is that the folks on the call want to know why are hackers interested in their company? What do they need to know? And what do they need to do in the future? So Chris, you want to start off and tell us why would hackers be interested in someone's company, someone who's on the call, small company, maybe they do some carpentry, maybe they're a small engineering firm or architecture firm, or a small electrical contractor. Why would hackers be interested in their company?
So I think, Jim, there's a couple different reasons, but the number one we see a lot of times is everyone goes, why are you interested in my company? Who cares if they want my list of people that bought carpet, or my client list that has my electrical contractors in there? Well, ultimately, there's several different things. One, they want to use those contacts to be able to send their data or their techniques to other people. So i.e., if I get a virus on your machine, that means I can pass it to all your friends and contacts. The other aspect is that they're looking for revenue generation. Okay, and how is the hacker going to make money? Well, they can try to blackmail you, but then if you don't have money, what they're really going to do is they're going to go after your insurance companies. And if cybersecurity insurance companies right now, they pay out because it's cheaper for them to pay out $10,000, $100,000 as opposed to defending your small case. So that's what we really see, is that they're going after the insurance money if they have it. Also, too, they may then also later send all your data out to the internet as well, too, so that your information becomes public.
And how does someone know if they have been hacked?
Well, that's a great question. Sometimes they don't know. A lot of times you have viruses on your machine. Sometimes your data has already been sent out. Sometimes they're leaving their tools on your computer to invoke them at some other point in time. So, basically there's a bunch of good hygiene that you should do to make sure your stuff is protected.
By the way, speaking of hacking, can you tell us all on the call here, I'm sure everyone's dying to know, they've been reading a lot in the last week about Zoom being hacked. What's going on with Zoom, and what can we do to use Zoom in a safer way?
Sure. So there's a bunch of different things that you can do as a user. So one of the things that we see is people are actually, if they have their corporate email address and their normal corporate password that they use to get to their corporate resources, people are using that same username and password in Zoom. So that's one thing right out the bat. Don't do that, because now all of a sudden, if Zoom gets hacked, they now have all your credentials for your work environment. But there's some other things we're getting ready to post on Zoom as well, too. So there's some other higher security issues that are going on with Zoom as well, as that we're actually evaluating as a provider, is should we be using it, just because of where the data is flowing, how it's being accessed, and there are people that are being able to hack through Zoom meetings currently and getting the lists as well as doing other things. So that's a consideration to look at as well, too, which we'll be posting that on our website shortly.
Okay. We're mostly talking about hacking into our computers, desktop, laptop, many of us working remotely now. And that's a big concern for both internal and external IT support companies. What about our other personal devices? Are they at risk as well?
I think that's one of the things we're trying to see, what is the impact on the mobile device world, as well as their home machines. So the big thing is think about what's happened. The internet has been turned upside down. We used to always see it. We used to be out in our offices working there, and now all of a sudden there's a lot of people working from home next to their kids that have computers that they're playing games online. They haven't been doing their updates and patches. There's no security on those machines. So what we've seen, starting to see some attacks that actually are, the hackers are attacking an employee's laptop in their house and then coming back through, even though they're using a virtual private network, and going back in and encrypting data inside the organization. So those are all concerns. So you need to be very careful at home. What are you doing? How are you protecting your stuff? Make sure, simply going in there and making sure your firewalls are on your home computers, and your kids' computers, or whoever's in your home office. Make sure that you're patching all the computers. Make sure your antivirus is up to date. Those are just little things right there that make a big difference.
What do you recommend for your clients as far as policies and procedures 101? You know, the sort of like the no-brainers that we should all be part of our best practices.
Yeah, so I think that's a lot of what we're seeing out there is, and most organizations just do it. You know, they don't necessarily have a formal policy and procedure, and I think that's something that you'll have to start considering now, because, for instance, how do you handle your mobile phones? Do people have corporate phones, or do they have personal phones that they connect to corporate devices with? Okay, then who owns the data at that point? Because technically they have it on their personal machine. So I think you have to look at that, and those are policies and procedures of, what are you going to do? Because ultimately, this is where the gray area becomes. So let's say that employee leaves, or doesn't want to get back their, doesn't want to disconnect from your systems. There's a lot of issues that you need to do. So I think just talking about that up front is really important. What is your mobile device management policy? You know, what is the best practices for people remoting in from their homes? Do they always use their hotspot? Do they always use security, their VPN? What do they do? And those are types of things that I think a lot of people, organizations, are just starting to think about, because unfortunately now it is a requirement.
Okay, good. By the way, Chris has a couple of links on the in the chat room for further advice and reference. So take a look at that when you have a chance. All right, so this is one of my favorite topics because it gets our lawyers involved. What about a disaster recovery plan, and what happens when you do get hacked? So walk us through that scenario. Hopefully that hasn't happened to anyone on the call, but if it does, what's it look like?
So that's a great question. So I think we look at, where does my company stand right now? And I think that's what you have to look at as an organization. Do I have my any security controls into place? Am I actively managing my systems? And I think those are really important to say, hey, where are we right now? I think the next question then, Jim, is, okay, what happens if something does happen? Okay, and I think the most important part is, obviously, that is a disaster recovery plan. As much as getting the data back, and it is how are you going to communicate to your different organizations, and that's where legal can be very helpful in those scenarios. So, example, there is right now, Maryland set up a cyber SWAT team that you can actually call as a resource. They will spend an hour on the phone with you and help you walk through some of the scenarios and put you in contact with the appropriate people to help you. Everything from legal to cyber teams that can help mitigate those issues. But once you start having something, I think that what we see a lot of times is people don't realize it's occurring, and then they start doing more things, or they're trying to fix it themselves, which then just tends to exacerbate the situation and make it worse. And that's where I think a lot of times are. So if you don't know what's going on, shut down your systems. Okay, stop it. Don't let the data, don't let the virus to continue. Reach out for help. Find out what to do. You know, and that's a quick phone call. And then you can get a forensic company into place, because it really depends on the size of breach. So if it's something as simple as one workstation happened, you want to contain that. But let's say all of a sudden now it's gotten into all of your servers in your business, or your line of business software that's got all your financials. These are types of things that you want to stop it as fast as you can. Call up by even simply turning everything off. Call your local forensic company, or reach out to the state. Help contain the virus. They will come in and let you know what the extent of it is, and then they can come up with a way to remediate the issues. So that's either as simply as putting in proper controls, working with the MSP like ourselves to fix it and prevent it from happening again in the future and close those holes.
And what about the often discussed cyber insurance? Do the insurance companies, the vendors, really back it up, and how does that work?
Well, what we're seeing is that the evolution of cyber insurance was, it used to be part of your normal cyber plan, and then your regular insurance, and then all of a sudden it became a secondary rider. Now it's gotten to the point where it's so sophisticated that they've got 10 to 15 different controls based on your insurance company that they can offer you for things such as social engineering or just data loss or like a lightning strike. You've got a lot of different things that will cover you in a lot of different areas. So I think the big thing is though, what we've seen some of the insurance companies do is making sure that you're adhering to certain standards so that they are willing to pay out on those insurance claims as well too. So for instance, if you didn't have dual signatures possibly on certain levels of checks going above X amount, they may not pay that because now they see that as a social engineering, and you do not have good policies and procedures and processes in your organization, so they may not pay that money back. So those are the kind of things that you want to look at, the policies and procedures. You want to see how that lines up with your cyber insurance, and you want to make sure you have good hygiene internally. If you do those three things and good processes, you're going to be in a much better place.
Chris, thanks. What can you give us? Walk us through one or several actual scenarios that we might have read about in the paper of some of the latest hacks, and as you walk us through those scenarios, give us your own commentary on how they might have been avoided.
Sure. So I think we saw a lot of attacks going on people's firewalls and machines, and a lot of network scans looking for vulnerabilities once everyone started moving into their home offices, if you will. And those are things that, hey, having just good firewall in place will seem to help mitigate those risks. But what we've really seen is the timing of that going along with spam email and viruses that spam. That actually has increased about 800% on that. And the thing is, this isn't your rich Nigerian uncle asking you for money anymore. Like that's been, I think that's what been used to desensitize us, that look at the hackers, they're not that sophisticated. Well, they're very, very sophisticated. Okay. And I think those types of emails are used to desensitize us. So now what we're seeing is the virus is coming in through email. So how can you prevent that? Well, if you're using a personal email account, obviously be, cautious on that. But if you have your company account, email account, make sure you're using a very good spam filter that has advanced threat protection in there that will actually keep the viruses outside your network before they get to you at home. So therefore, or into your mail system. So that's one quick way to protect all your data from email or from those types of viruses. User awareness training, I think, is the biggest one on top of that. So making sure that your users, most spam happens usually between 6 and 9 in the morning. Why? Because everyone shows up and they've got so many emails, and I got to get through all of them real fast so I can start my day. So all of a sudden now you've got people that are a little bit less, and they haven't had all their coffee yet. So all of a sudden they're less likely to, be as scrupulous as they need to be. So I think, having user awareness training and saying, just educate your client base, because it only takes one person. I mean, if your finance person gets hit, there goes, all the finances, they tend to have the most access to all of the corporate resources. Think about it. We've got a shopping list now on LinkedIn, and we've got a shopping list for hackers with your website, because you go to the website and it says, hey, the owner is Chris Riismandel and the CFO is so-and-so. So all of a sudden now they're spoofing emails from, the CFO, and that happens on a regular basis. And most people don't get caught by it, but it only takes one person. Think about it. If I can get $200,000 a day in ransomware from, one person a day, and I have to just email 50, that's a pretty good business, from a hacker's perspective. So I think those are things to consider. But user awareness training and making sure you have a really good spam filter would be the top things there, along with multi-factor. So multi-factor is Authentication is, you may have seen it with your banks. When you log in, it then emails you a code or asks you to go to an app to enter in a number. We highly recommend that for all of your email as well too, because email systems are being breached, and that's what, they're allowing the people to email spam to other organizations using your identity.
I want to go back to the user awareness training. Can you give us a few examples of what you recommend for your clients for user awareness training?
Sure. So we run a package that basically spams our client base, and it lets it does it with different types of techniques, so that we can see who tends to be more gullible than not, and if they actually click on something, it will notify us, and then we can actually have a little quick video that will turn around and say, hey, FY, we saw that you clicked on this email. This is how you should identify these types of emails, and how to remediate that and help train the user so they're more aware of how to protect themselves when looking through email.
By the way, who's more likely to be tripped up in that scenario, the C-level folks or the the skilled people out in the field?
A little bit. I think it's across the board, but I think the value add is more getting the C-level people, because they tend to have the keys to the kingdom. They got the accounts, the financials, and so forth. Being very targeted. I don't think this is, there's not a lot of we call spray and pray. Like, they're not just going out and hope to get everybody and make a big list. It's a lot of times now it's much more targeted for who should I contact, who has access to financials, who is a person that will get me access to people who have financials. So those are, we're seeing that as well too, where somebody was emailing in a secretary to one of the C-level assistant, if you will, and they spoofed something as the C-level person. And spoofing is basically, it makes the email appear as if it's from them. And she entered it into a chat with this person, and we even told her that, hey, that should have never, that was not real, because she had released it from the spam filter. She released it from another filter. She let it go 3 times. But they're engaging us that way, trying to get to that C-level person. So just be aware.
Right. Okay, good. So this is somewhat of a competition or a game between the hackers and the users. Mm-hmm. And I'm not sure who's got the upper hand these days, because the hackers are getting smarter, but I believe that the users are also getting smarter. How do you see this playing out, and what advice do you give us on the call? We're all users. What advice do you give us in your parting words?
Sure. So I would just basically, you have to be ever vigilant. Pay attention to every email. Think about it. Should I be receiving this email? Does it look legitimate? Question everything. We actually had a case the other day. Someone sent an email from a spammer, and then a few minutes later, after they had replied, they sent them a text message to their phone to engage them on the email that they sent. So that they're jumping platforms right now between that as well too. So just because I said, hey, I'll just go take this to text, that doesn't mean that it's legitimate as well too. So be aware of that. So I think ultimately, just think about technology as a whole. Yes, they're getting smarter, and unfortunately in the small business world, we're not the large financial institutions. They've got, millions and billions of dollars to spend on IT security because they have to. So that means that we're more of a target now than them, because they realize they're not going to get into those large organizations. But we are not a hardened target. We're a very soft target for a hacker.
Okay, great. Well, we're running right on schedule. I don't see any questions in the Q&A folder, but I would like to open it up to questions from the attendees on this call. There's a Q&A folder right down at the bottom of your screen, right in the middle. And if you type in a question, I will read the question out to either Chris or Laurie or both. So as we wait for questions, why don't we jump back to Laurie? Laurie, anything to add based on you've had some time to listen to Chris? You have anything that you'd like to add for the folks on the call?
Yeah, I think it's just listening to you. It can be overwhelming for people that aren't as tech savvy. Do you have any recommendations? I mean, we have very small, I mean, we have, people that are 2 employees, of kind of where to start. I guess it could just be extremely overwhelming. This is not a world that we're that familiar with. I know that, I've seen this. I mean, people have problems just with bandwidth right now.
Mm-hmm.
The internet is overtaxed, and there's a lot of just little things. It can be very overwhelming. Do you have any recommendations for those really small companies of where they can kind of just start? Because it can be, you're trying to keep your head above water, and then you got this stuff.
Sure, absolutely. So I think, the first thing is just making sure that your computer is up to date with, with antivirus. Make sure that your systems are patched. If you're using Windows, make sure you're up to at least on the Windows 10. You want to make sure you're 10 professional, avoid home if you can. And then obviously make sure the system's all patched. Make sure that you have antivirus on the machine. Make sure the firewall is on as well too. So just doing those 3 things right there is hopefully making you not the weakest sheep in the herd, so that the hacker is going to go somewhere else because they're looking for easy opportunity.
Hey Chris, I have a question.
Yep.
Oh, sorry.
I was
have
going
a
to say.
Question. You mentioned one of your favorite acronyms called VPN. Can you share with the listeners what VPN is?
Sure. VPN is a virtual private network. And what it is it's a way to extend corporate resources to a mobile person or a mobile worker. So for instance, Jim, when you go ahead and you're working back at Norfolk Kerman, what do? You get logged onto your computer, you then start up your VPN, and then you connect to your corporate resources. And what does that do? That protects all of the data when it's in transport between your computer and back to the office. So it's a great way to extend the network to a user that's mobile and protect the data.
Okay, great. Laurie, let's jump to you for a minute. And you discussed very briefly the I believe you called it a housing shortage or low inventory of residential housing. And how does new construction fit into that whole formula? The new homes being built, are they no longer being built on spec? Are they being built and are sold first and then built? What's going on in that part of the industry with new homes?
It's all over the place. I will say that I've talked in the last 2 weeks to people that have in the past built a lot of homes on spec, and that probably will slow down at this point, just because the risk is higher. Reward is higher also, but the risk can be somewhat high on that. But it's all over the place. I mean, it's from multifamily to single family to towns, that type of thing. I mean, the Council of Governments, Metropolitan Council of Governments came out in the fall with they said we were going to be at 320,000 units short by 2030. So this just kind of will exacerbate that. If you can stop building, you still need the housing. And the only way to create more inventory besides, I mean, obviously resales, is by building new houses. And again, it depends on which part of the state you're talking about, whether it's going to be more in the multifamily range or single families or townhouses or anything like that. And then the problem is, once you have that low inventory, we've all taken Economics 101, is housing affordability becomes a huge issue, and people just can't afford to live in this state. And that becomes a whole nother issue that we're starting to see as we move forward. So this is just going to make the problem worse. One of the arguments for keeping us as essential is that we can't continue to have a housing shortage as we come out of this, and people are going to have jobs, and housing affordability is going to be even a bigger issue than it's been in the past.
When we talk about the housing industry here in the state of Maryland, there are obviously, I would think, some regions that are doing better than others. Did you want to comment on what that might look like?
Sure. I mean, obviously, where the jobs are is where people generally tend to go to. Obviously, the Eastern Shore, Southern Maryland, and Western Maryland struggle a little bit more with housing affordability. It's more expensive to build out there, that type of thing. But I think that the entire state we just have a huge housing shortage. Every region has a different issue, whether it's land, affordability of land, jobs, income, school capacity has been a huge issue for our industry. So it's all of those things, and every region has their own unique set of circumstances of how they're dealing with it. But this is extremely concerning as we start to see. I mean, as of this morning, I still talk to our members. We're still building and that type of thing. But as we start seeing issues with financing, supply chain, people just not wanting to leave their house to go look at a house, all of those things are going to start to exacerbate the issue. So it just kind of depends on the area you are, but everybody's got their own unique challenges. So.
Speaking of challenges, related to multifamily housing, I understand that I guess there's a mandate that no evictions for the next, is it 60 or 90 days? And is that by state or by municipality? Can you dig into that a little bit?
Yeah, that's a state executive order. So there's no no evictions. I believe it has to do with when the state of emergency expires. So it's a little bit open-ended on how long that is. You know, that creates a whole nother problem, not so much the evictions, but you know, past due. It's not relieving people of paying their rent or mortgages. It's just pushing it off. So the concern then becomes, you know, in 90 days, are people going to be able to afford it? So it's a huge challenge. And obviously, I don't think anyone wants to evict people if they don't have to. But the issue is going to be, you know, when does this end? How many people are unemployed? Can people afford? You're still have to pay. So now you have to pay 3 months worth of rent the next month, or you know, you have to figure out a payment plan or that type of thing, and it becomes a kind of a snowball effect.
And by the way, with the court systems closed, where the evictions occur, that's going to be an interesting dynamic when this is all cleared up. The visual is not a pretty one.
No, that's true. That's very true. I think we did just get a question about the market, the housing market. Going into this, the housing market was actually relatively strong. Interest rates are at an all-time low. You can't get much lower than where they are right now. I was hired here in 2007, so I lived through the 2008 recession, which was led by the housing industry. I think the housing industry will remain strong, dependent on how quickly this moves forward. Unemployment obviously is a huge factor. If people don't have jobs, they can't afford to buy housing. But I do believe that the housing market will remain strong as long as we can continue to build, as long as we're still essential. I think that we are a part of the economy that can kind of lead us out of this as we move forward. So, and like I said, I talk to builders every day. They're still building. They have problems with inspections. They have problems with you know, supply chain, those types of things. But so far, things that you can work through and try to work through together. So right now, I feel like we're in a pretty strong spot. It's just a matter of how long, what unemployment looks like, and then kind of what the market looks like as far as financing. That's the other big variable right now. So.
Okay. Any other questions before we have sort of our parting shots? Okay, Laurie, since we got you on the screen, any parting words of wisdom to the folks who have joined us?
Yeah, so just I like a couple of big factors. I believe our industry will remain strong. I do think that we need to keep our employees safe. That is a big thing. I've had a lot of people call and say, do you think you know, they're going to shut down our industry? What do you think is the future of that? And the answer is, I don't know. This is unprecedented. I really don't know about that. But I do know that we need to keep our employees safe, do as much as we possibly can remotely, use whatever technology is available to you, you know, whether it's through IT support or some other resource. That's very important to trying to keep our industry strong. and continue to build houses. If we can continue to build houses during this time, I think the industry will emerge pretty strong at the end of the day.
Thank you. Chris, parting words.
Yeah, same thing. I think from an economic perspective, I think once we figure out how to manage the COVID-19, I think the economy was doing extremely strong. We didn't have a financial reason for where we are today. This is more of a the pandemic is what's driving this at the moment. So I think as long as we can keep our businesses moving along, staying solid, being secure, doing all those things, I think there'll be a great opportunity once this settles out. And in terms of the last IT tip I'll give you is please don't ever click on a link. If somebody sends you a Zoom invite, simply go to Zoom and type in the number. I think that's what I did. I helped someone do that a little earlier today. So that goes for almost everything. So if you get an invite from LinkedIn, don't click on LinkedIn invite. Go to your LinkedIn account, look at messages, and then accept them in the portal or in the website itself. So that's what we recommend. So avoid links because literally that's how most of the viruses are being deployed via that or attachments. Even Word documents, they're not Word documents. They say .doc or .dox. They're not. In the building industry, I'm sure you use a lot of PDFs. Same thing in PDFs. Double check everything. Make sure you got a good spam filter that does advanced threat protection because obviously that will make a big impact on your business if you run one of those things. But otherwise, I think there's a lot of opportunity whenever there's change. So I think there's an opportunity for businesses to get a little bit more efficient, a little bit more versatile, a little bit more dispersed, and hopefully everyone will survive this. From a physical perspective as well as the business perspective.
Well, thank you. I think I don't see any more questions, and I think we've come to the end. I want to thank Laurie and MBIA. I want to thank Chris and Epoch, and both of your staffs who were very helpful in the logistics and getting this webinar done. Thank you for everybody who joined. Everyone stay home and stay safe, and we'll see you on the other side of the curve. Thank you all very much, and take care.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye.